Prem, thank you so much. So we are, as we promised, going right into deep conversations with technologists who are sitting at financial institutions, leveraging AI, building agentic systems or figuring out how they can or cannot. And I am so pleased to have you join us. Prem.
Delighted to be here.
Yes, Natarajan.
Yeah.
Close, probably, not quite all the way. But Prem, you are Executive Vice President and Chief Scientist, I had it in the wrong order, at Capital One. And before that, you should tell us a little bit about your background so we all understand what you're bringing to Capital One.
I'll go in chronological order rather than reverse. But first I have to say, to be preceded by somebody from Silicon Valley wearing a tie and a tech guy at a bank who didn't do any attempt at wearing a tie, I think it's an interesting place to start. So I started my professional career in kind of the DARPA sponsored world. That's where I was for like close to 2 decades. DARPA was the biggest sponsor of AI machine learning research for a very long time. Much of the world we live in today, I think we can trace the credit back to DARPA, that amazing institution, and to all the program managers there who came up with these long-term programs. And a lot of us learned to practice our trade as part of it. I then spent several years in academia, USC. DARPA was still a big part of my life, even there, funding my work.
I get the sense it's still a big part of your life.
It is still. I still, in fact, we are helping out with the DARPA program even now in my current role. But then I went to Amazon, where I headed the Alexa AI organization. I was there for 5 years. And now I think I have the most satisfying role of my life so far, which is at Capital One.
That's awesome. That's great. Well, we are pleased to hear what you're doing at Capital One. So we are talking about agentic AI.
Yeah.
Capital One is, I think, recognized as one of the most data-forward, tech-forward leaning financial institutions.
Right.
And you're sitting there thinking about how do you leverage the data and how do you use it to build products and services, external-facing, internal-facing, but agentic AI, and even moving into multi-agent applications. Tell us, what does that look like? And tell us as much as you can about what you're building and, importantly, how you're building it.
Yeah. Maybe it helps to maybe fix the notion of an agent to some extent, even though there's a little bit of an elephant aspect to it, like different people touch different places. But in the last 2.5, 3 years, we've been living through like an incredible technological evolution. One of the speakers this morning was talking about how she felt like Teresa was talking about like multiple technology evolution life cycles. Even for those who've been in this area of technology for a long time, it does feel that way. And it's just that we have learned to enjoy the disorienting feeling. It feels like an amazing ride because that's where you learn a lot. Some of the revolutions, we saw this big thing come in, generative AI, it can do a lot of things. And then we started making it try to do more and more things and more and more. We started asking it simple questions and factoid questions, and it was answering like a human. And then you get into this zone that's called anthropomorphic confusion, where you start thinking, oh, this thing is behaving like a human, so it'll scale like a human. Then you start asking it more and more complex things, and suddenly you're less impressed. And you're like, oh, maybe this is a fever dream, maybe this. And then we ask ourselves, gee, now I have open source models and I can bring my data to those models and I can fine tune them and make them specialists in my task. So one of the trends in the past couple of years has been the ability to specialize these models. The second is that these models have acquired a new, quote unquote, cognitive capability, that of reasoning. At its core, reasoning is breaking down a complex workflow or a complex task into simple constituent tasks, if you will. And so when you combine the specialization with the power of reasoning, you can now suddenly take that complex thing that the plain old vanilla Gen AI, can you believe it? We're saying that in 3 years, plain old vanilla Gen AI, and break it down into simpler things that these specialized agents are then able to execute and take action on. In that sense, Melissa, it's not different from you having a big vision for FinRegLab, and then you have a team. You don't go and tell them, here's my vision, now you all go execute on it. you might share the vision and then say, here are your different roles in executing this vision, right? But in this agentic world, here's the amazing thing. You can also have some people who go and say, are they doing this the right way? Are they applying the right thoughtfulness? Can you just test them? So what happens as we bring this agentic system to life, for example, the first thing we launched is this thing called Chat Concierge that helps our auto dealerships interact with their customers, schedule appointments on their behalf, but also show their inventory and things like that. And we said, you first have to create a plan. The user's request comes in, you create a plan. Then you have validating agents that kind of test the plan against your business rules, business policies. Is this compliant? Sometimes you might get into an iterative conversation with the user saying, is this thing going to satisfy your requirement? Then you validate the outcome, and then these things operate together. So that's really how an agentic ecosystem comes to life. And all of this that we've built and we've deployed, this was the very first thing we deployed. We now have many more applications. The first one happened to be customer-facing because it was very low on the risk spectrum. And so we thought we could learn a lot from all the interactions that we had. But even the simplest ones always have a human in the loop to start with, and they will always have a human as the backup.
Yeah, there's definitely a theme coming through. One, but also with a question, it sounds like as enterprises are, Teresa said this, examining what do we do as a bank, as a business, we are then thinking about which different types of models, which different types of AI deployment can help in the process of delivering a credit card, for instance, servicing a credit card. Not her words, I'm putting that in. And at the same time, we're realizing there are these technologies, some may be non-deterministic, some may be machine learning, explicit outcomes. And you, Teresa, Max, and others are bringing them to bear in solving what are the business functions. You're minding the way in which you have to have confidence in the models. You're thinking about how you put it all together. But you, just like Teresa, who said earlier, we're actually now seeing it's not just about putting it together so that it performs functions, and yes, making sure it does it well. We are also appreciating it can bring strategy insight to what we're doing. And I feel like I'm hearing you speak to that too, that it's going beyond just satisfying functions more capably, with more insight, to Max's point, but actually able to start to at least unveil strategy that may have value.
For sure. I mean, that's one of the functions. But I'd say, as we did this first round of things, Melissa, there were some things we learned, right? The first thing is the importance of having your own tech stack, right?
Yeah.
And you're now talking about all of this. What does it mean to have your own tech stack? You could call it your own platform, right? Your own tech stack means you can actually configure every one of these based on kind of the observations and monitoring analytics that you have built into your tech stack. So it turns out to address some of these issues, like you have to change the models, or you have to update the models with the thing. Some other things, you have to change the services. You also need guardrails, right? And these could be guardrails on the input, guardrails on the output. They could also be cyber guardrails, et cetera. So the tech stack is so complex. The notion that somebody can build one that you can buy that you can't configure is kind of a very limiting notion, and in the end limits the different functions that you can deploy it to. Yeah. And so what we've done is we have our own tech stack, and so we're able to configure and modify each piece of it. That's one major takeaway, and that's kind of
one major advantage if you're a very large institution.
Yes, and one major advantage if you are a large institution, but we're not among the largest. So I think it also requires a commitment to, there is both an amount of size, but then because you need that for some level of scale, but it's also your view, your worldview of how this is going to happen, because there are so many vectors of scaling. Somebody earlier today was talking about how expensive the talent is. So the question is, how do you get the most out of the talent that you can afford, because you cannot do it without that expensive talent? Well, it turns out your tech stack, that's a horizontal asset across all of your businesses, is a wonderful way to scale the impact of that talent. They're more satisfied. They're having more impact, everybody. The second big lesson is that production is the first step on the AI stairway to heaven, right? There are many, many, many more steps after that. post-production monitoring, analytics, improving these models, iterating, adding more intent, adding more scope, being more robust, expanding the robustness of your guardrails. So there's just so much more to build in terms of this ongoing learning. So that's the second lesson we had. When you do all of this, then it actually kind of gives a tremendous sense of flexibility to every individual in the organization. If you have your own tech stack and you create a lot of reusable capabilities, which we did, then different people around the organization who understand their use cases best, and this is where that strategy thing that you're talking about, the strategy overall has to be that people are subject matter experts in what they do. We have to be subject matter experts in giving them flexible tools that they can then configure towards doing what they want to do. And what is emerging is that agentic formulations are a fantastically flexible way of providing that composability to the organization at large. Of course, that imposes now a lot of governance and risk management, so we lead with it. You talked about data. Obviously, protecting data is front and foremost, so you have to start with things like scanning and tokenization to protect all of this data, all of which we do, which then brings me, if you've not been on this journey for a long time, you can't skip the first few steps of the journey. You still have to start. It's just that you have the advantage, you can look at a few other runbooks and go faster on the first few steps, but you still have to go through those steps.
No, that's super helpful. So you alluded to, you all emphasized, and Sheena did as well earlier, partnerships, interdisciplinary partnerships.
That's right.
And seeing those kinds of research, data gathering is integral to how Capital One, but also the industry itself, may be learning and solving some of the questions around AI deployment. Do you want to say a little more about what you all are doing?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the sense of trustworthiness, reliability, robustness just a couple of minutes ago. In every aspect of AI, especially as it's evolving this rapidly, we're finding that there is a lot of, the challenge landscape with AI and the opportunity landscape with AI is almost like a chain, a mountain chain that has multiple Everests in it, right? So there are many, many Everests to scale.
Yeah.
And so as we look at that, it's not within the capability of any single organization to have the talent and the intellectual heft to actually do all of that scaling on its own. So that was behind our belief that we have to create a network with academia, that multi-sector partnerships, like with FinRegLab, are key, like on the policy side, the thoughtfulness side, et cetera. So what we have focused our academic partnerships on are kind of responsible, trustworthy, both AI and how we make decisions with AI. There are so many problems and challenges there that need to be addressed from a first principles thing, and what better place to start first principles things than in partnership with academia. So yeah, we started off with Columbia University. We have a multi-year center there, then University of Southern California, now UIUC, but also NYU. We have partnerships with MIT on the data side. So all of this, and then of course the big one we did recently is with, I'm sure Sheena talked about it right in the morning.
She did, yeah.
Yeah, the one with NSF,
Yes.
where we are the first, I think only bank to be part of the National AI R&D Institutes. You know, the institute we've funded is one on mental and behavioral health, led by Brown University, right? So we kind of have a very broad view of how, of these Everests all along this chain, scaling each one of them will actually teach us things that will help us scale the other ones. Mm-hmm. So that there's kind of that spirit too of curiosity and learning and transferring that learning across these different challenges.
Yeah. And we've talked about having some of those partner academic institutions come and share the research they're doing, because collectively we're all trying to make sure that we're learning from the technologists
100%.
and the academics.
They would love to do it too.
Yeah. So I know we have a minute left. We had talked about having you opine on what you would say to fintechs and other industry stakeholders, how they might be learning about how to balance cutting-edge innovation with safety responsibility in light of how you all have approached it.
Yeah, you know, when I was coming in from Amazon to Capital One, we all have friends who wish us well. And they were like, you know, Prem, like you're going from an environment where you build on Friday and deploy on Monday, right? I told them, it
Do you
could
think
still,
that's still true over there?
it's still true in general in the tech industry,
Fair enough.
especially in startups. And I said that we will still build on Friday, deploy on Monday. There may just be many months in between, right? And so I said that general paradigm will still hold. But the thing is, I also pointed out to them that we deploy on Monday, but the number of times we roll back on Wednesday is also painful, right? And so what I discovered coming into Capital One is that designing resilience, robustness, kind of complying with policies, business rules, is not like, let's take our best shot at it, but like you actually have to say, I'm building a lot of confidence that I'm building something that's going to exhibit those behaviors. It's not like best attempt. It's like a credible, full attempt. I might still have the humility to acknowledge I don't reach it, but that's not because I said reaching it is not important. That's what I'm aiming to do. And so what I have found is when I integrate over a period of a year or year and a half, we are actually able to move at a speed that I would say it's at least comparable, if not faster than the tech industry. You just need to have a certain relentlessness of focus that you're going through these steps and you're getting one out and other out. You do have to keep more things moving in parallel so that they're syncing up, et cetera, and that there's some resourcing and the horizontal scalability comes in, et cetera. So my advice to fintechs would be, you are choosing to play this game that is in a regulated environment. It's going to be very difficult to come in and say, I have a tennis racket with, motored accelerators but I still want to play in the same game and compete. And so you're going to have to play the game the way it's set up, because it's set up this way, because unlike most companies, we're trying to serve society at large, and finance is so central to people's lives. And so the rules of the game have been set up and they've matured over time. Yeah. But so I'll just tell them, if you play it the right way, it's actually not a slowdown. So you can still build on Monday, deploy on Friday, on Friday, deploy on Monday, just take a few more weeks in between.
Yeah, and I think that's a message too, I will say it. We hosted a meeting yesterday with 30 CEOs at fintechs and a handful of federal regulators. We didn't have any banks in the room, by the way. And the fintechs were very candid. On one hand, we're working to an investment community that wants returns faster. Yet we're selling into banks and partnering with banks who have these much longer horizons. And so I think the points you're making shouldn't just resonate with the fintechs. It's also the investment community who is behind the fintech sector.
Because they're the ones who are pushing them also in terms of these things. You're just buying, look, if you were investing in a quantum computing company, it's brilliantly clear, even to the most aggressive venture capitalist, it's going to take 10, 15 years for a payoff, right? So if it helps you, think of finance as a giant quantum computing investment. It's going to take time to pay off, but when it does, it'll pay off brilliantly, right? And in this game, the other thing I would say, Melissa, I've always believed this, talent is destiny, and organizationally, you cannot outrun your talent. So talent may be expensive, but they are your destiny.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yep, your team is critical. So thank you, Prem. Really, really good to have you here. I appreciate it.